All right, we started last week in chapter 24, and you say, well, why are we back in Matthew? I thought we were studying Revelation. There are things that happen in Matthew that Jesus told us about that are going to lead up to the events of Revelation. Revelation, basically, when we get to chapter 6, which is our next stop, is going to start the actual tribulation period. But between the churches, which are historical and up to today and up until the rapture, and then the picture of what's going on in the throne room of God and Jesus taking the book and preparing to open the scrolls and those things, there are things that are going to be happening that we need to know about, be aware of, and prepare us for what we're about to study in chapter 6 here. Hopefully next week. We might or might not make it. I don't know. But last week we saw that Jesus came out of the temple with the disciples, and they wanted to show him the beauty of the buildings in Jerusalem. And he said, all of this is going to be torn down. There won't be one stone upon the other. And that kind of concerned him. He walked on across the Kidron Valley and up into the Mount of Olives or Mount of Olivet. And he sat down and looked back over the city, and 4 of them came to him and ask him, a real personal, for some personal information about, tell us what's coming. And so he started that last week. Verse 5 now is where we pick up this morning in chapter 24 of Matthew. Let's go back to verse 4, the lead in. And Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Now, he could have said a lot of things. You're going to see a lot of earthquakes, or you're going to hear wars, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, or you're going to hear this. But the first thing he tells them is take heed that no man deceive you. So that must have been something of very important stature for him to say that first. Now, when he was talking to the disciples roughly 2,000 years ago, they are no longer here. They're dead. So is all of this out of date? Does that not affect us anymore? No, this is a timeless message. And the message, just like it was to them and the people of that day, is to us today. Be careful somebody doesn't deceive you. And so make sure that we heed that warning. And so we might ask, well, how do you know you're being deceived? Or how do you know, when somebody's trying to lead you in the wrong way? Well, to know if something is true or false, what do you have to have? You have to have a standard that you know is true, that you can test it against. And that's the Bible. Now, unfortunately, most Christians, not people, Christians today don't study their Bible very much. In fact, somewhere I've got some statistics. The American Bible Society, I believe, is the name of the group. Yes, American Bible Society did a study of 2,500 adult Americans, folks like us. And what their study revealed is that they did not read their Bible more than 4 times a year outside of church. Now think about that. 4 times a year. Once a quarter. And they may have read, John 11:35. Jesus wept. That may have been their reading for that quarter. Yes, ma'am.
I read, too, that the Bible outsells every book every year.
Always does, always has, since it's been printed.
Why, if they're not written?
Go up on the shelf. Give them away to people that don't read them.
Giving it to their younger children.
So think about that. 4 times a year. Now, these are people who go to church, but they don't read their Bible outside of church more than 4 times a year. The majority of them do not. So why do you think what was their first and most prominent reason that they don't read their Bible?
Too busy.
Don't understand it, or, it's too complicated, or what?
Don't have time.
enough what they're listening to in church or what they're listening to on a sermon on
Okay.
YouTube. That's how they're getting fed. is,
Okay, they think coming to church and listening to the preacher is all they need. But the number one thing that they said was, I don't have time. Now, my question to those people would be, are you ever on Facebook? Are you ever on the internet? Do you ever watch television? Do you ever go to a movie? But they said, I don't have time. 26 million adults in this country never open their Bible outside of church, according to their study.
Did they include an age group?
It just said adult, so I would say 18 and up. I don't know of any breakdown of the age groups. And remember, these are people who are churchgoers, and many of them would be professing Christians, whether they are or not is between them and God, but they at least they are are church-going people. So the question is, can you find 10 or 15 minutes a day to read the Bible? I mean, most of us can squeeze 15 minutes in somewhere. But do we do it? Well, that's up to you. That's your decision. But it all falls to us. You can't blame anybody for doing this. That's a personal thing. If we don't read the Bible, then that's the way it's going to be. But the thing about it is, what Jesus was saying, he says, don't be deceived. How are you going to know if you're being deceived or not if you don't know what the truth is? And the truth is the Scriptures. The truth is the Bible. So it all plays together. Now, are there false prophets or false teachers in the world today? Absolutely. He warned about that in verse 5. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. We've mentioned to you before, there are 4,000 plus religions on this planet. Now, all of them are not Christian. All of them are not, followers of Christ by any means. But those who are, or who claim to be, many of them are off the track, so to speak, because they're not truly following Christ. But when we talk about a false teacher or a false prophet or someone that's speaking falsehoods about the Lord, what's the first thing you think of? Maybe a TV evangelist. It might be a cult religion. Might even be a satanic church. They had a meeting yesterday on the square in Tyler, if you were aware of that. And on Friday, in the rain, there was a group of Christians went down and prayed over the square, and I thought, good for them, but I missed it. So there are people out there who care. But they had had a satanic church meeting yesterday down on the square in Tyler. Not in New York or Los Angeles, in Tyler, Texas.
How many attended?
I have no idea. I didn't go.
But I mean, was it announced? How did you know they had it? Yeah.
It's on media. Media put it out. They covered it.
I just
So-
wondered if we're surrounded by them or.
Well, supposedly this church that held the meeting came from Dallas-Fort Worth area. So they're recruiting. They're down here trying to start a missionary group for their. Yes.
My son pointed out to me, his daddy called him, and there was in England, they had a big parade celebration of some kind of a world sports thing. And in the video, he loaded it up for us to see parts of it. They had pulled out, they had a mechanical Red Bull. Did anybody hear about
It was
that?
the Commonwealth Games in London.
Yeah. And then they were like worshiping the Red Bull and had all kinds of things going. And there was like 70,000 people that was there attending it, and they just sat through the whole thing, and not one person got up and left or anything.
And that is exactly what Jesus is talking about in verse 4 and 5. It's going to be not coming, it's here, and it's going to be more prevalent and more prevalent and more prevalent as time goes on. Let me ask you this. If you knew today that at 3 o'clock that the rapture was going to happen, what would you do between now and 3 o'clock?
On my knees.
Don't be on the phone for
You know.
some people.
Yeah. See, we don't know, I'd probably be getting mad because I'm not gonna get to see the football game. But, no, not really, I don't care. But some people live like everything's just gonna roll right along, and then the rapture's gonna happen, and I'm gonna be gone, and there's gonna be no situation that I'm gonna have to deal with. That is not what Jesus is gonna tell us. I want you to think about that up front. So we think about TV evangelists or cults or satanic churches being the false prophets. What about the little lady that has been going to church for the last umpteen years and teaches or tells all the kids about her God and all the stuff that they need to do to be saved, but it's not the truth? False prophet, false teacher. But very nice lady. You'd like to have her for a neighbor. But we don't see her as a villain. But anybody that's carrying the wrong message is against what God is telling us to do, to be on the alert, what Jesus tells us to do, be on the alert. What about parents? Now, what's the relationship supposed to be between parents and children? They're supposed to obey, right? The children are supposed to obey the parents. Sometimes we get that backwards. But anyway, the parents are supposed to lead. They're supposed to guide. They're supposed to teach. Well, what if you were one of the Hebrew children that came out of Egypt and you were out in the desert and you'd crossed the Red Sea, you'd seen the 10 plagues, and you get to the promised land and two of the people who had gone in says, this is a great land, we can do this, God's with us. And the other 10 said, oh, we can't do that. And your mom and dad said, we're not going over there, there's giants over there, they'll kill us. Are you supposed to follow wrong instructions? You follow God's instructions. But a family that leads your children in the wrong way is a false doctrine, a false prophet. What about a pastor that's been in a church for years and years and years, and he may have been there longer than some of the members are old, more age than, he's got more age on the church than they have in life. And it may be a mega church or it may be a small church, or it doesn't matter what size, but they're well respected in the community. They're involved in the community. The church has always got something going on. But does anybody ever stop to check and make sure what they're being taught by the pastor is scriptural? Who would you say in the New Testament was one of the most scriptural apostles? It had to be Paul. I mean, he wrote half the New Testament. And what did he tell the Bereans? He was in Thessalonica, and the Thessalonican, the adversaries there, the opposition, ran him out. He goes to Berea. They accept him. They receive him. And he's preaching the truth and the gospel to them. And what does it say that he did? Or they did? They listened, they accepted, and then they went and searched the scriptures to find out if he was telling the truth. Do you think that should have been done in Berea? No. So what is all this about? If your Bible's not falling apart because it's been used, then you ain't using it enough. There ought to be pages falling out of it, and you're going, I need to get me a new Bible. And you ought to have marks all over it where important stuff has been brought to your attention. Ask yourself this question. I don't want anybody answering. I want you to ask it to yourself. Where did you get your beliefs? Did you get them from man, whether it be a preacher or your parents or someone else, or did you get them from the scriptures? If you got it from man, you may be believing the wrong thing. You may be, off the track. May just be a little bit, but if a train misses the track by a half an inch, what happens? You have a train wreck. Doesn't matter if it's a mile or a half an inch. You got to be straight on the track. So where did you get your beliefs? I mean, you believe stuff since you were a child. Things that you were taught. Have you ever checked to see if they are legitimate? That they match up with the scriptures? Well, here in America in the last few months, it seems that Satan's influence has increased at least tenfold, maybe 100-fold, maybe more than that. And you see that the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and those kind of things. And abortion now is not a federal thing. It's dropped back to the states. So what are the states doing with it? Some of the states are saying, no, we're not going to have it. Some of them are saying, well, yeah, maybe we should under certain circumstances. California, you may or may not know, just passed a law. This is law now. This is not a bill. This has absolutely been signed by the governor that 28 days after birth, they can abort a child. Now, that used to be called murder.
That's murder.
That used to be called murder, but in California now it's called abortion. A child can be a month old and they can still take its life. Now, how long is God going to put up with this? I don't understand why he hadn't done something already, but he knows better that than I do. So those things are around us. And eventually, that law out there may become, a law in Texas, or even worse, it may become a law in the United States. It may become a federal law, because there are people who are doing everything they can to get abortion to be made a federal law. And adding that little phrase to it should be no problem. Exactly. So, we're in some serious times here. Now, what are the times? Well, Jesus is telling the disciples about the end times, the times before the rapture, the times right before the tribulation. And if you read this, and as we talk about it, you just think about it, are we there? I think we are. I think we're right on the threshold. Now, I don't know when it's going to be. You don't know when it's going to be. Nobody knows when it's going to be. So if somebody puts a date on it, then just discount them, throw them out to the side. But, the way we're going to know stuff, the way we're going to get this wisdom and enlightenment of what we should do, should not do, what to be looking for, is to study the scriptures. Now, let's be clear on terms. Reading the Bible is good. Studying the Bible is better. Now, what I mean by studying, well, you can read a page. But if you take that page and you take a verse and you start looking up the references in that verse, and you start discerning exactly what the setting was and the meaning of that verse and what the intent of that verse was, and you use a concordance so that you understand what the words mean and you understand where to find like verses, and you use a Bible dictionary and you use trusted theologians, and again, those are men. Sometimes they might be wrong. They don't always agree, so somebody's got to be wrong. So, just think about it.
Brother Nelson,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know about other people, but before I even open my Bible when I'm looking to study it, I say, Lord, give me something through the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
I've got something, I don't care how much you study the Bible. If you don't have the Holy Spirit guiding you and discerning it for you, your lie will come up with no telling what. But the Holy Spirit's not going to lead you wrong.
The prelude to study, like Sandy says, is prayer. We're talking about reading the Bible, studying the Bible, but the prelude to that is prayer, so that you have that understanding. James, 1:5 says, ask and you shall receive ask for wisdom and you'll receive it abundantly. It's somewhere along in there. That may not be the exact citing of it, but it's pretty close. So he uses this first warning, and we see the expanse of it and what he meant by it, this deception that's going on and how it can happen and the result of it. But that's not all he said. There was other things to look for. In verse 6, he says, you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. All right, the end of what? End of the church age. when the rapture comes. All right, that's the end. And has there been a day that you can remember in your lifetime that you haven't heard something or thought something or ran across something about war? From World War II to Korea to Vietnam to Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, now over in the Ukraine. In fact, people who look at stuff like that, currently, there are 25 armed conflicts going on worldwide right now. Now, we hear about the Ukraine, but we may not hear about some of these others that are a little smaller in scope or don't have the participants that have the name like Russia does and things of that nature. But there's always war going on. There's always a rumor of war, a threat of war. But notice what he says there in verse 6. He says, see that you not be troubled, or that you be not troubled. How in the world could you not be troubled? You know, when you think that war might come to you. If you lived in the Ukraine today, would you be worried about the possibility of being attacked or starving to death or, you know, being bombed? Probably. So how do you keep from worrying about that? Well, we got to remember, Jesus is talking in a bigger picture than what we are. You can't help but be worried if that is standing on your doorstep. But you don't have to fear for the future because you know you're going to be with Him for eternity if you have accepted Him. So the application here is not to not worry this immediate instant, but just be assured God's got this under control. We're all going to die. We just don't know how or when. So He's got it under control. And after that, then you have no worries. And that's basically what he's saying here. Yes, ma'am.
When I was in Honduras with Colin the last time, no, it wasn't the last time, but I was coming home and some of the women there had come over to see me, and one of them says, "Are you going to fly in an airplane?" And I said, "Well, yes." And she said, "Aren't you afraid?" And she said, "That thing could fall." And I said, I think her name was Medelia. I said, "Medelia?" I said, "Let me put it this way. I have a husband in heaven and another son in Michigan. And I don't care which one I spend the night with."
Yeah.
That's the way we ought to be. It doesn't matter what's going on in this world. We're okay.
Yep. God's going to take care of it. Absolutely. So Jesus warned about false teachers. He warned about false prophets. He warned about false Christs who would come and claim to be Him or claim to be representatives of His. He warned about war. How's he doing so far? Is he pretty accurate? He hasn't missed anything yet. So why would we think he'd miss anything else? Well, let's see what else he has to say. In verse 7 then of chapter 24, he says, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places." Now, we know what all of those are. We know what a famine is. We see it on TV or hear about it where there's a country or a large section of area that they don't have any food to eat because of no rain, too much rain, or animals, insects or something. We know what pestilence is. That's diseases. I mean, we're all familiar with cancer. We know what that is. We know what COVID is now. We've lived with that a couple of years. We know what earthquakes are. So all of these things have been done as a prelude, so we know what he's talking about. We have a reference point. But now they are not the magnitude that they're going to be, because one of these days there's going to be earthquakes and things, natural occurrences like there has never been before. And this world is going to get a rude awakening. There are always seemingly nations and kingdoms against each other, whether they're at war or not. You know, right now, would you say we are friends with China or enemies with China, friends with Russia, enemies with Russia? We're not in war with them, but we don't get along with them either, you know. So there's that fear factor comes in again, and all of that. But it's a serious thing that we just don't really consider, because we just get up and go about our business and don't worry about it. And, you know, we're more worried about who's gonna play the ball game this afternoon than what it is we need to be concerned about. Because we haven't set our focus on the Lord. Our focus is still on us. It's on what we want, what we're gonna do, what we're gonna try to achieve, and all of those things. But there's no shortage of maladies, there's no shortage of tribulations, there's no shortage of worries around the world. You need something to worry about? You ever been to Yellowstone National Park? Some of you have. There's a mega volcano under Yellowstone National Park. It is 240 cubic miles of molten rock under that park. Will it explode one day? Yeah, probably. There are two main magma chambers. See, I know all this stuff because I'm a scientist. Yeah, right. I read all this. Two chambers. One of them is 10 miles deep and 55 miles long. The other one is 30 miles deep below that. This is molten rock. This is what would blow out and go all over the place. It covers parts of 3 states, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. It covers 1,500 square miles. That would be the mouth of the crater if it blows or when it blows. It is estimated to be a magnitude 8. You remember back in 1980, Mount St. Helens blew up in Washington. And I'm sure you've seen pictures of that and the fallout and the smoke and the ash and all that. This will be 6,000 times greater than Mount St. Helens. In essence, the whole northwest United States and part of Canada will be gone. The whole northern hemisphere will be affected by the ash and the fallout. The sun will be darkened. It will change the weather patterns. Now, here's the good thing. The scientists say, well, you know, it may not blow up for another 10,000 to 40,000 years. These are the same people that said there were dinosaurs 600 million years ago. They don't know nothing about time, okay? They can't tell time because God made the earth in 6 days and rested on the 7th. And it hadn't been 600 million years. It's been all right at coming on 7,000 years. So they can be off on their predictions.
Well, if California falls off the United States, all that water can run in and go over the lava and put it down.
There'll be water all the way over to Chicago when this happens. So, you know, the effect of it is going to be worldwide, certainly, you know, localized in the United States and Canada. It will have the destructive power of 1,000 atomic bombs. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, multiply that times 1,000. And that's what's going to happen one of these days. Now, how do they know that, or how are they watching that? Well, they said that these sophisticated things that they've got flying around in space on satellites measures the rise of the landfall every year. It rises 6 centimeters a year. That means nothing to me. I don't know a centimeter from a parking meter. But I thought I can figure it out. So I get out my little ruler that's got millimeters on one side and inches on the other, and I go down there and find 6 centimeters, and that's 2 3/8 inches. So that land is rising 2 3/8 inches every year. And when it finally gets to the busting point, it'll just blow up. So you can worry about that now. You didn't have anything else to worry about. So I wanted to make sure you weren't left out, that you didn't have anything to worry about. God's still in control. Don't worry about it. If he wants it to blow up, it'll blow up. There ain't nothing you can do about it. If he doesn't, then everything's fine. You know, you can still go up there and see the bears and the elk and all that stuff, the buffaloes. All right. Now, look at verse 8. All these are the beginning of sorrows. All these, everything he's talked about up to this point, are the beginning of sorrows. Now, you know what sorrow is. You've had sorrow in your life. You've had depression. You've had anxiety. You've had fear, probably. But what does the word sorrow mean? It has a little bit different connotation. It is a reference to a woman in childbirth. And what it is that the pains get more frequent, the intensity gets more intense, or it gets more unbearable, so to speak. Now, I'm told all this. I don't know. Okay, this is all hearsay to me. But this is what, I've read about what some of you ladies have been through. So the situation on this earth, unlike some people think, will not get better every day until Jesus comes back. It's going to get worse every day until Jesus comes back. And it's going to become debilitating to some people because of the worry and the fear and the depression that it brings. You may know somebody that's a worrier, Oh, it's cloudy. Is lightning going to strike my house? I don't know. I'll sit and worry about it all day. There are people like that, and I'm sorry, I'm not making fun of them or anything, but that's the way they deal with reality. That's the way they deal with life. But that's not the way we should be dealing with life, because we've got the assurance that God's in control, and He's going to stay in control. And so some will think, well, there's no way out of this. But there is a way out, the rapture. And that's what will come, and things will get bad, but then after the rapture, things will get worse. So this is the beginning. It's like the rapture is the starting gun for the tribulation, but it's a running start. All these things are going to be happening until the rapture, and then after that, when the tribulation begins, then they'll magnify. And we go, well, how could it get any worse? Well, it can, and it will. It won't be life as usual when we get to these points. And if you go to other nations, if you go to Africa now, parts of Africa, if you go to Israel, if you go to Iran, if you go to China, here you can say, I'm a Christian, and people just kind of look at you. Or maybe some people will say, well, so am I, good for you. But in those countries, what may happen is you may be put in jail. Or worse than that, they may kill you. Now that will one day will be in America. May not be in our lifetime. May not be in our kids' lifetime. But it easily could be in our grandkids' lifetime. So what does that say about the urgency we need to have of telling our families, our friends, our neighbors about Jesus? Don't get hung up on the plan. We can't change the plan. God set the plan in motion. But think about what we can do to help one person avoid what he's talking about when that tribulation starts. Verse 9, they shall deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all the nations for my name's sake. And we know there are people being killed for the cause of Christ in certain locations around the world. But I want you to notice that little word at the end of that sentence, near the end of that sentence. You shall be hated of all nations. That includes the United States. Do you see that going on? Do you see that happening now?
Yes.
Absolutely. If we're not in the last days, we're certainly in our last days. So we got work to do as long as we're here.
I heard a woman say the other day she was a Christian, but she wasn't a Bible thumper.
So she might or might not be a Christian. I don't know. So, yes, ma'am.
Since the tribulation itself is directed toward the Jew, toward Israel, I don't mean that other nations won't suffer, but I'm saying that God's purpose is Jacob's troubles. This is the forerunner And I believe that the Jew is the one who better be paying attention and lift up his head and realize he's missed the Messiah, because he's gonna suffer terribly if he doesn't. Those Jews that have not accepted Christ, that don't believe that he is the Messiah, they're gonna suffer even more than Americans, even more. Bible says so.
You may be right, but I haven't found that yet.
It's in Daniel.
The focal point of Revelation is Israel, but the rest of the world will be. In fact, when we get to chapter 6, one plague takes out a fourth of the world population.
Is that New Boston?
So now, if that takes everybody out of Israel, that's not even a fourth of the population. So it's going to be all worldwide. But the focal point is Israel, where most of it will be happening, but then it's going to be widespread. All right. He says, you will be hated for my name's sake. Not that you have done anything wrong, it's just because you claim to be a Christian. And you may end up in jail, or you may end up dead because of it. You say, well, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen in the United States. It may not. I don't know. Let me tell you what happened in South Africa. There was a man by the name of Jacques de Vos who was a medical intern, and he lacked 1 week getting his medical license, and he had a patient. It was an old lady who was expecting a baby, and he said, your baby's 19 weeks old. If you abort that child, you have committed murder. Now, did he do anything illegal or wrong? The hospital that he was working in denied his license, and here's what they said: because of your refusal to comply with basic medical ethics. I thought medical ethics was to try to help people, not kill people. And so what they were saying is, you're going to advise her if she wants an abortion, we'll do it, because that's money and that's what people expect us to do. Now, you say, okay, but that's in South Africa. Well, tell me where this one happened. A man named Paul Vaughn was taking his children, or were going to take his children to school one morning. They were waiting out by the car, waiting for their dad to come out. Cars of federal agents rolled up, got out with body armor and long guns, AR-15s, whatever, and they pointed their guns and held the children, who were fairly small children, at gunpoint in the yard by the car. The rest of them stormed the house. The wife was asking, what's going on? What are you doing here? They didn't answer her. They find Paul. They handcuff him. They take him out of the house. They don't tell him or his wife why they're arresting him, what he has done, and they take him to jail. Now, what would you suspect he has done? He's either killed somebody, bombed a building, something serious to warrant this kind of attention, right? What he had done was walk into a abortion clinic and sung a Christian song. Now tell me what country that happened in. Not only the United States, it happened in Tennessee, the southern United States, the Bible Belt.
They have a statue of Satan up in Tennessee.
The Bible don't mean much in the South anymore to some people. He's facing an 11-year prison sentence for singing a Christian song in an abortion clinic. Now, you probably have heard since Roe versus Wade, there have been 60 pro-life centers that have been bombed or set fire. There is a group that has claimed responsibility for several of these. They are known by the government. How many arrests have been made? Not a single one. Do you see where the government's going against not only the people, but against the Constitution? The Constitution allows for free speech and freedom of religion and all of that, and yet Christians are being targeted, and people who bomb and set fire to buildings and potentially might kill someone are not even being pursued. That's the country we're living in right now. Now, I'm going to make you a promise. The presidential election of 2024 ain't going to fix it. It may change it, but it is not going to fix it, because these are the things that Jesus said is going to happen. And they're going to happen. There's no way we're going to stop that. So this worldwide hatred of Christians is going to be coming not after the rapture. Well, yes, it will be after the rapture, but it's going to start before the rapture. We're living in those days right now. If you look at verses 10 through 14, let's look at those. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. The end being the end of the church age, which will mean the rapture. So when he says many are offended, you know what it is to be offended. You've probably been offended in your life more than once. But this word means more than that. Offended means to begin to distrust and to desert one they should trust and obey. To become indignant, to purposely put a stumbling block or impediment in the way so that another may trip and fall. And you probably know people like that. You probably went to school with a brat or a bully that did stuff like that, trying to get you in trouble or trying to cause you problems. But there's adults that do it, do it also, not just those in school. But who's he talking about? You talking about Satan's minions and those that work for him? No, he's talking about Christians. He's talking about church-going people. He's talking about people who should be following the Lord, but yet they turn their allegiance away from him. Even though they may be saved, they are weak in their faith and they follow after the ways of the world. Do you see any of that going on? I told you a couple of weeks ago about my friend that's a Methodist preacher, and that his church was going to have to make the decision to go progressive or to go conservative. Well, they voted to go progressive. And this is in Tyler, Texas. You may know some of those people. You may work with them. They may be some of your kinfolks. But they chose to go the way of the world, to have gay pastors and people, LBGQRSTUV, on their staff and do whatever, and teach children and all those kind of things. Now, he's already told me, he said, I can't put up with it. I got to go with God. So I'm sure he'll be leaving that church, and it's a shame because he's a good preacher. And he may be Methodist, but he knows the Lord. There's some of them, it's okay. And he's one of them. But you say, well, that's a shame, and they shouldn't have done that and all that. But, we're not Methodist, we're Baptist. I guarantee you it's coming to the Baptist religion sooner or later. It will be here. It's going to happen. We are not exempt. He says many will betray and hate one another. Again, he's talking about God's people, Christian people. But because of our selfishness, because of our narcissism, because we want our way, there are those who are going to turn against their Christian brothers. In the Civil War, it might have been brother against brother. In the war of Christianity or religion against Satan, it's going to be Christian brother against Christian brother. We're not even talking about the world, about the lost. We're talking about the people who are saved. Because iniquity abounds, the love of many shall wax cold. What is this coldness he's talking about? Well, we already see some of this today. It's the idea or the mindset that I'm saved, I've got mine assured, you go get your own because I'm going to live like I want to do. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm not going to go to church. I'm not going to witness. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'll live in the world if I want to because I've got this assurance of salvation. First of all, I would suggest if you know someone like that, you might need to talk to them about their salvation. But there are believers who are going to lean that way. And so this selfish heart, this narcissistic heart is going to start, or has already started to appear. And it may come on initially as docile and friendly and non-threatening, but eventually it will turn sinister. That's called quenching the spirit. And American Christians, people in church, people who believe and trust in God, can be very cold and judgmental and heartless at times. That's just the way things are going to be. That's the way things are now, but it's going to get worse. And we're out of time. So we'll pick up there next week. I'm sorry?
I have a sister that we try to talk to all the time about Christ. She reads all kinds of books and stuff like that, but she won't read the Bible because she says she can't understand all those these and nows. And we try to tell her there's English versions where they speak the same. She says, "Why read it when I can't understand what it's saying?"
Yeah.
And she says, "I talk to God all the time, and He talks to me." I don't know exactly if she's talking to God, but.
Yeah. All right. Let's have our closing prayer. Father, we come to you today. We just thank you for your blessings. Lord, you warned us about what's coming. You told us what's going to happen. It's happening right now. It's going to continue to happen. We don't know when you're coming, but we know that you are coming. And we just ask you to give us the peace to know that you're in control and just keep us close to you and give us a desire to tell others about you so that they might escape the tribulation and the things that are to come during the tribulation. We ask you to be with our pastor as he brings the message this morning. Just use him in a great way, Lord. Give us an open heart to hear, to understand, to accept your word as we read it, as we hear it, as we study it, and to act upon it as you would have us to. And Lord, all these on our prayer list and those that have been mentioned, especially be with Bernie during her back surgery, be with her brother Jim and all the family, Lord. Just give them peace. And we thank you that he knows you, that he's at peace. Be with the Manziel family, the loss of Bobby Joe and the loss of Jackie's boss. Be with Rainey. Lord, just bless that little girl and help her. Be with little Cooper and heal him. There's so many that need your touch. There's so many that need your reassurance. Lord, just make us prayer warriors for all of them. Thank you for your mercy and goodness. Forgive us where we failed you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
How's your daughter?